The cross-section of a three-dimensional shape is just the resulting two-dimensional shape when you take a plane and you cut an object with that plane. In the case that we see here, we've got two different shapes on the screen. I've got my cube and I have a cylinder. If we look at the cube first, we've got to establish a plane that we're going to slice essentially this object with. So what you'll often see is you'll either see the plane drawn, where I'll have something like this plane drawn, and we're saying we're going to slice it across that plane. Actually, let me give you a better idea if I just do. We're going to slice it across that plane, often referred to as the parallel to the base or a horizontal slice. If we do slice that horizontally, we would be slicing essentially this cube at that point. So everything on that cube will be completely sliced. It's almost as if you take a box and you completely cut it across the middle horizontally. If we open it up, it's pretty obvious. The top section will give you a resulting two-dimensional shape that would be a square. The bottom section, again, would just be a square. So that would be the cross-section that is resulted. It would be the two-dimensional shape that appears. Now, if we erase that real quick and we look at it, the vertical cross-section, or the cross-section perpendicular to the base, would be the cross-section resulted by using this line. And if I see that, really, since it's a cube, it's going to give me the same thing. It's going to result in two squares. So those two are actually pretty simple. The only time that we will look at this shape and we'll see a cross-section that is anything but a cube would be if we take either a diagonal, say something like that, which would result in essentially taking off a corner, would be where I get a triangle here. Or I could just completely cut this diagonally across the line here. So I slice it down there, and we'll notice these sides are going to be shorter than this diagonal here, which will give me a cross section of a rectangle. So really all a cross section is if I were to take an object, three-dimensional object, and just slice it all the way across, however it is, vertically, horizontally, diagonally, it'll be that resulting side that you see. It'd be like if you froze a Coke can, and you'll see this example in the next one. If you froze a Coke can and you just completely sliced it, opened it up, and looked at what two-dimensional shape was resulted. And I preface that because if I look at the cylinder over here, you'll see that's going to be similar to that of a Coke can. If I were to take this cylinder and I were to make a cut vertically, and I were to open that Coke can up, my cross section would be a circle, because we would cut it here, and essentially what we would see is a mirror image of this circle, except it would be at the middle of the cylinder there. If I took my line and I cut it horizontally, so I sliced it horizontally and I opened it up, I would actually see what would be a rectangle. And that would be essentially what I would get if I sliced this perfectly through here. I would see kind of a oblong rectangle here. So again, this takes a lot of visualization, takes a lot of kind of working with it, but it is the two-dimensional shape that's created when you cut or when you slice a three-dimensional object. I've got a couple more examples here. I've got a cone and a pyramid. If I take my cone and I were to slice it horizontally, which would be like taking an ice cream cone and slicing it, looking at what's inside of there, I would have a circle. If I took it and I sliced it vertically, straight through the vertex here, and I opened that up, I would see an isosceles triangle. And the last one I've got would be if I went something along these lines, where it's kind of horizontal, but it's more diagonal than not, I would see something like an oblong shape here or an ellipse. And then the last example I've got is just a square pyramid. If I cut it horizontally, I'll see essentially whatever my base is, which would be a square in this case. If I cut it vertically, I'm going to see a triangle. And then diagonally, depending upon where I cut it, if I slice it somewhere here, I would see what would be a rectangle. So again, cross sections, a lot of visualization there, a lot of working at looking at what would happen when that slice occurs. But what we have to keep in mind is it is a two-dimensional shape, not a three-dimensional. It would just be a two-dimensional drawing.